She was 7 months pregnant with twins, successful, radiant, and counting down the days until she could finally hold Leo and Luna. But on the Tuesday afternoon she died, bleeding out on her sun-drenched living room floor. Only one witness saw what really happened. The rescue dog lying beside her body. A pit bull mix named Turbo. The husband came home to find her. The police suspected a robbery gone wrong. Detective Elias Vance focused on the usual angles: the broken marriage, the desperate intruder, the tragic accident. But then something impossible happened. Every time the grieving mother-in-law walked through that door, the dog, a dog the neighbors described as calm, protective, and impossibly gentle, transformed into a snarling, trembling, uncontrollable beast. Not at Daniel, not at the investigators. Only at Madison Lawson. Only at her. And that one detail, the way Turbo reacted to a scent his traumatized brain would never forget, is what finally unmasked the killer everyone trusted. The question is, how does a mother murder her son's pregnant wife? Why would she? What could possibly be worth 3 lives? Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this investigation. If you're comfortable, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what drew you to Cold Trail today. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these untold stories to light. You have to go back. Back to before the blood, before the staged robbery, before the dog knew to fear her. Back to when none of this seemed possible. Back to when Ava and Daniel were just 2 people trying to build something real. Ava Marie Lawson, born October 1991, Seattle, Washington. Oldest daughter, 1 younger brother, the one who color-coded her school binders in 3rd grade, who ran student council like a Fortune 500 boardroom, who knew she'd be an executive before she turned 16. Her mother, Claire, taught economics at a community college. Her father, Robert, ran a small, independent bookstore that barely broke even but somehow always survived. Every Saturday morning, same routine. Robert would open the store early, brew terrible coffee in the break room, and play his favorite podcast, NPR's Planet Money. Always the same topics: market disruptions, behavioral economics, the hidden systems that run the world. Ava would sit at the register doing homework while customers browsed and her dad muttered about inventory spreadsheets. She told friends later that those mornings felt like the safest place on earth, like she was learning the secret language adults use to navigate life. Robert died in 2016. Stroke. During inventory. 58 years old. Ava was 25. She kept his entire collection of business books, every margin note he ever made. Every Saturday after he died, she'd go to the bookstore, now run by a new owner, order terrible coffee, and sit in the same chair, same corner, same routine. Just no one explaining compound interest to her anymore. Ava graduated University of Washington in 2013. Marketing and business strategy. Got hired at Vanguard Marketing Solutions the same year. By 2018, she was senior account executive. By 2021, she was regional vice president, managing a portfolio worth $47 million. Clients loved her. She had this way of making complex financial pivots sound simple, like she was explaining why you'd choose one coffee over another. Confident but never arrogant. Direct but never cold. She wore tailored blazers to client meetings and sneakers to creative brainstorms. She brought pastries to Monday morning stand-ups and remembered everyone's birthday. Her team called her the closer because she never lost a pitch. She met Daniel Lawson at a networking mixer in May 2019. He ran business development for a mid-sized tech consulting firm. He noticed her first. She was standing near the bar, listening to a recruiter's pitch with this look on her face. Polite but completely uninterested, like she was calculating exactly how many seconds until she could escape. Daniel walked over, interrupted, and said, "You look like you need a better conversation." She laughed. They talked for 2 hours. He liked that she asked real questions, not networking questions. She liked that he didn't try to impress her with job titles. They got coffee the next morning, dinner 3 days later. Moved in together by December. Daniel was different from the men she'd dated. Grounded, thoughtful. He cooked elaborate Sunday dinners, listened to jazz while he worked, and had this habit of leaving handwritten notes on her desk before big presentations. "You've got this. You always do." He made her feel like she didn't have to perform, like she could just exist and that was enough. They got engaged in June 2021. Small ceremony. Close friends. A restaurant by the water. Ava wore a simple white dress and the vintage diamond ring Daniel's grandmother had left him. The one that would later be ripped from her finger and used to stage a crime scene. Everything should have been perfect. The career, the marriage, the twins she'd dreamed about since her father died. Everything was ready. Everything was aligned. Everything was finally falling into place. Except for one person. One person who'd been watching this life get built, watching her son choose his wife over his mother, watching her financial control slip away with every passing month. And that person, Madison Eleanor Lawson, had decided she'd had enough. By the time Ava turned 30, she'd built the kind of life people put on vision boards. Corner office, 6-figure salary, a husband who still left notes on her pillow, and twins on the way. She'd close deals before lunch, mentor junior staff over afternoon coffee, and still make it home in time to cook dinner with Daniel. They had rituals. Friday night movies, Sunday farmers markets, morning walks with Turbo through the park where Daniel proposed. From the outside, it looked effortless. From the inside, it almost was. Almost. The only crack in the foundation had a name. Madison Eleanor Lawson. Daniel's mother. 62 years old, silver hair styled weekly at an upscale salon, designer handbags that cost more than most people's rent, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes when Ava entered a room. Madison lived in a gated community 40 minutes away, drove a leased Mercedes she couldn't actually afford, and held court at the country club like minor royalty. She'd been a real estate agent once, back in the 90s, successful enough to develop expensive tastes but never successful enough to sustain them. When Daniel started making real money in tech consulting, Madison's lifestyle became his responsibility. Not officially. Never officially. But there were always emergencies. The roof repair, the medical bill, the investment opportunity that just needed a small loan. Daniel paid. He always paid. What Daniel didn't realize, what Ava figured out within 6 months of dating him, was that Madison wasn't asking for help. She was maintaining control. Every check Daniel wrote kept him tethered. Every crisis call reminded him who raised him, who sacrificed for him, who deserved his loyalty. And when Ava suggested, gently at first, that maybe Daniel should set some boundaries, Madison's mask slipped. Not in front of Daniel, never in front of Daniel, but in the small moments, the private comments. The way Madison's hand would linger too long on Daniel's arm while smiling at Ava like a competitor she'd already beaten. The breaking point came in March. Daniel's firm landed a major client, and that client needed a marketing overhaul. Daniel recommended Vanguard, Ava's company. The contract was worth $200,000, and part of the strategy involved transferring several legacy accounts, including ones Madison had once managed, into a unified portfolio under Ava's supervision. It was good business, clean, efficient, profitable. But to Madison, it was war. Because those accounts weren't just business. They were her last direct line into Daniel's professional life. Her final justification for why he needed her advice, her input, her presence. And Ava was about to cut that line permanently. Daniel made the call on a Monday morning in April. He sat at the kitchen table, Ava beside him, and told his mother the accounts would transfer by Friday. No negotiation, no compromise. His voice was calm but firm, the tone of someone who'd rehearsed the conversation a dozen times in his head. Madison's response was immediate and surgical. She didn't yell. She never yelled. She simply asked, in a voice dripping with wounded confusion, why her own son would humiliate her like this, why he'd let his wife destroy everything she'd built for him, why he'd choose a woman he'd known for 5 years over the mother who raised him alone. Daniel held firm. The decision was final. Madison hung up. Ava waited for the fallback. The guilt trip email, the text message about feeling unwell, the sudden emergency that required Daniel's immediate attention. But instead, 3 days later, Madison called Ava's cell. Not Daniel's. Ava's. It was Wednesday afternoon, and Ava was in her office reviewing pitch decks when her phone buzzed with a number she recognized but rarely saw on her screen. She answered. Madison's voice was cold, controlled, frighteningly polite. She wanted to meet. To talk. Woman to woman. No, Daniel. No drama. Just a conversation about what was really happening here. Ava, exhausted from a morning meeting and feeling the twins shift restlessly against her ribs, said no. She suggested Madison speak with Daniel directly. Madison's laugh was soft, almost pitying. This isn't about Daniel anymore, sweetheart. This is about you and what you've taken from me. The call ended. Ava sat at her desk, heart pounding, the kind of elevated pulse her obstetrician had warned her about. High-risk pregnancy, twins. Stress could trigger early labor, could compromise blood flow, could turn a manageable situation into a medical emergency. She texted Daniel. He called immediately, furious, protective, promising to handle his mother once and for all. But Ava felt it then, the shift in the air, the sense that something had already been set in motion that couldn't be stopped. Madison wasn't bargaining anymore. She wasn't manipulating. She was done talking. And when Madison Lawson was done talking, that's when the real danger began. Tuesday morning. Daniel kissed Ava goodbye at 5:47 a.m., his suitcase already loaded in the car. His flight to Boston, leaving in 2 hours. Major client presentation. 2 days, 3 meetings. The kind of trip that could define the quarter. Ava walked him to the door, turbo padding behind them, tail wagging sleepily. Daniel paused at the threshold, hand on her belly, feeling the twins move. Call me if anything feels wrong, he said. She promised she would. He left. The house went quiet. Ava spent the morning working from home. Laptop open on the dining table, conference calls blurring together. She made tea. She answered emails. She felt the twins kick, a reassuring rhythm against her ribs. At 11:23 a.m., the doorbell rang. Turbo barked once, sharp and alert, then trotted to the door. Ava checked the security camera feed on her phone. Madison, standing on the porch in a cream-colored coat, designer sunglasses perched on her head, holding a small gift bag. Ava's stomach dropped. She considered not answering, but ignoring Madison would only delay the inevitable. She opened the door. Madison smiled. I brought something for the twins, she said, stepping inside before Ava could respond. The gift bag dangled from her manicured fingers. Turbo sniffed her cautiously, then retreated to his bed near the couch. Madison walked into the kitchen, setting the bag on the counter, and turned to face Ava. We need to talk about Friday. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Ava stayed near the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. There's nothing to talk about, Madison. Daniel made his decision. Madison's smile faded. Daniel made the decision you told him to make. The air shifted. You've been planning this since the day you met him. Taking over his work, his finances, his life. And now you're taking me out of the picture completely. Ava felt her pulse spike. This isn't about you. It's about what's best for the business. Madison laughed, sharp and bitter. It's always been about me, Ava. You just couldn't stand that Daniel had someone in his life before you. Someone who actually knew him. Ava reached for her phone on the counter, fingers moving to text Daniel. Madison lunged, not violently, not at first. Just a quick grab for the phone, a reflex born from desperation. Ava stepped back. Madison's hand shot out, shoving Ava's shoulder. Hard, frustrated, furious. And Ava, 7 months pregnant, center of gravity shifted, balance compromised, fell backward onto the tile floor. Her head cracked against the hard surface. Her spine twisted. Pain exploded through her skull and abdomen. She tried to breathe, couldn't. Blood pooled beneath her. Madison stood frozen, staring down at the woman she'd just killed. Then she moved. Fast. Methodical. She grabbed Ava's phone, deleted the partial text, wiped the counter where she'd touched, pulled the vintage diamond ring from Ava's finger, opened 2 drawers, scattered a few items, and then she walked out, locking the door behind her, leaving Ava and the twins to die alone on the kitchen floor while Turbo whimpered helplessly beside them. Daniel found her 6 hours later. The 911 call was incoherent, just screaming and Turbo barking in the background. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Too late. Ava was gone. The twins were gone. The scene looked like a robbery. Forced entry, no. Missing jewelry, yes. Signs of struggle, minimal. Detective Elias Vance arrived at 6:42 p.m., a 23-year veteran of homicide, and immediately felt the case slipping through his fingers. High-risk pregnancy, head trauma, no witnesses. The husband had an airtight alibi, boarding pass, and meeting attendance records confirmed. No enemies, no financial motive, no angry exes. Just a woman who fell, or was pushed, and bled out while someone stole her ring. The investigation stalled within 48 hours. Vance interviewed neighbors. No one saw anything. He pulled security footage. Madison's car never appeared on any camera near the house. He processed the scene. No prints, no DNA, no murder weapon because there wasn't one. Just a shove in gravity. The medical examiner confirmed severe internal hemorrhaging and a subdural hematoma. Cause of death: blunt force. Trauma. Manner of death: undetermined. Vance hated that word. Undetermined. It meant failure. It meant unsolved. It meant a killer walked free. The turning point came 11 days later during a routine follow-up interview. Vance sat in Daniel's living room, reviewing final details. When Madison arrived to check on her son, she walked through the door with a casserole and a concerned expression. And Turbo, the dog who'd been calm and gentle since the day Ava died, lost his mind. The growl started low, guttural, primal, then the barking. Then the lunging. Turbo threw himself at Madison, teeth bared, eyes wild, straining against Daniel's grip. Madison stumbled backward, genuinely terrified. Daniel dragged Turbo into the bedroom. Vance sat very still, watching Madison smooth her coat, watching her hands shake, watching her try to laugh it off. He's traumatized. Poor thing, she said. But Vance wasn't looking at the dog anymore. He was looking at the way Madison kept glancing at the kitchen, the way her perfume, expensive and distinct, lingered in the air. Vance made a call. Dr. Charlotte Hayes, K9 behavioral specialist, arrived the next morning. She spent 2 hours with Turbo, testing his reactions, documenting his triggers. Her report was clinical and devastating. Trauma-induced aggression linked to olfactory memory. The dog had witnessed something violent, and his brain had imprinted one specific scent marker as the source of that trauma. Madison's perfume, Chanel No. 5, batch-specific, expensive, identifiable. Dr. Hayes looked at Vance and said what no human witness could. This dog is terrified of her, and dogs don't lie. The warrant came through on a Thursday. Phone records first. Madison had claimed she was at lunch with friends from the country club between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the day Ava died. The restaurant confirmed a reservation, confirmed she'd been there, confirmed she paid at 1:47 p.m. But the cell tower data told a different story. Madison's phone pinged 3 towers that morning. One near her home at 10:23 a.m., One 4 blocks from Ava and Daniel's house at 11:31 a.m., and one back near the country club at 12:58 p.m. She'd lied. Not about lunch, about where she'd been before lunch. The timeline fit perfectly. Drive to Ava's house, confront her, leave by noon, meet friends for a late lunch, establish an alibi, act devastated when Daniel called with the news hours later. Then came the search history. Madison's phone, that expensive iPhone she carried everywhere, had a browser history she'd forgotten to delete. 11:47 a.m. The day Ava died, while Madison was supposedly driving back from the crime scene. How long does it take to die from head injury? 11:51 a.m. Internal bleeding symptoms, pregnancy. 12:04 p.m. Can someone survive fall on tile floor? She'd been researching whether Ava would live long enough to identify her. She'd been calculating. She'd been covering her tracks in real time. The forensic team went back to the scene. They'd processed it once, found nothing. But now they knew what they were looking for. Microscopic fiber analysis of the tile floor where Ava fell. It took 4 days. The report came back with 3 fibers that didn't match anything in Ava and Daniel's home. Cashmere blend, cream-colored, luxury grade. The forensic analyst compared them to the coat Madison had been wearing during the follow-up interview. The same coat she'd worn in family photos from earlier that month. The same coat she wore to every event, because it cost $3,000. And she wanted people to know. Perfect match. She'd been there. She'd stood over Ava, and she'd left trace evidence behind. Vance arrested Madison on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after she'd murdered her daughter-in-law. She was at the country club, sitting at her usual table near the window, sipping white wine with 2 friends who would later tell reporters they'd never suspected a thing. Vance walked in with 2 uniformed officers. Madison saw him coming. Her face didn't change. She set down her wine glass, smoothed her napkin, and stood with the practiced grace of someone who'd been performing her entire life. "Detective," she said, as if he'd come to update her on the investigation, as if she was still the grieving mother. Vance read her rights. Her friends gasped. Madison smiled, wounded and confused, playing the role until the handcuffs clicked shut. Even then, walking through the country club dining room in custody, she kept her head high, her expression serene, as if this was all a terrible misunderstanding that would be cleared up by dinner. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution built the case brick by brick. The phone records, the search history, the fiber evidence, the financial motive, Madison's pattern of control, the account transfer that triggered everything. And Turbo, Dr. Hayes testified for 2 hours, explaining canine trauma response, scent memory, the scientific validity of a dog's behavioral testimony. The jury watched video of Turbo's reaction to Madison, watched him growl and lunge and tremble, watched the fear and rage of a creature who'd witnessed his owner die and couldn't tell anyone until someone finally listened. Madison's defense argued reasonable doubt, circumstantial evidence, a grieving mother being railroaded by a detective, desperate to close an unsolvable case. But the jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. Guilty. 2 counts of killing a viable fetus. The courtroom erupted. Daniel sat in the front row, Turbo beside him in a service vest, and didn't make a sound. The sentencing hearing came 3 weeks later. Daniel read his impact statement. He talked about Ava's laugh, the way she'd reorganized his entire kitchen by efficiency, the names they'd picked for the twins. He talked about his mother's control, the decades of manipulation he'd mistaken for love, the financial and emotional chains he'd finally broken only for her to murder the woman who'd helped him see clearly. His voice cracked once when he mentioned the diamond ring, his grandmother's ring, stolen and pawned and recovered from a pawn shop 2 towns over. "She took everything," Daniel said, "and she'd do it again if it meant keeping me." The judge sentenced Madison to life without parole. She was 62 years old. She'd die in prison. Daniel started the Ava and Twins Legacy Fund 6 months later. Domestic violence prevention, financial abuse education, support for survivors escaping controlling family members. He spoke at conferences, testified before legislators, shared his story with anyone who'd listen. And Turbo became something unexpected. A certified service animal, trained specifically for trauma survivors, gentle and intuitive with people who'd witnessed violence, who carried fear in their bodies the way he once did. He visited hospitals, grief counseling centers, women's shelters. Children who couldn't talk about what they'd seen would sit beside him and cry into his fur. He'd become the witness he'd always been. Just this time, he was helping people heal. The dog who'd solved a murder by refusing to forget had learned to help others remember they were safe. And in the end, that was the justice Ava would have wanted most. Thank you to all my viewers and subscribers for your continued support. Stay tuned for daily true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe to understand what's happening around us.